What's up, weirdos?
Hey, yo.
Me? Shit. I got me a little something rolled. The lights are low, and we're about to chop it up with Abigail on the Manic, Pixie, Weirdo podcast.
Okay.
A safe space for weirdos of all shapes, sizes, colors, and creeds to relax and speak their piece.
Speak that piece.
So grab your glass of wine and grass the chief as I get off the mic so the main weirdo can speak. Peace.
Peace, God.
What is up, weirdos? You're listening to the Manic Pixie Weirdo. I'm Abigail, your host, and this is the podcast where we talk about all the different kinds of relationships that you can have in your life. And this week, we're doing it. We're doing the big, mean, scary boogeyman, the monster under your bed, communism. We're doing my relationship with communism. So why did I say all of that sort of like bullshit in the beginning? Because that's sort of like the idea that like I got. I was taught from a pretty early age that communism is like, the boogeyman under your bed. It's coming to get you. It is evil. It is horrible. It is, that system of government that is out to get you, that is about, control and not freedom and all of these things. So I went on a quest to figure out what communism was, and we're going to talk about it. Because, so like, as it turns out, communism, when you boil it down to like its base roots, its most pure like form, communism is when you boil it down, it's that idea. So when you're a kid and you talk about like world peace and like that world, that like fantasy world of like unicorns and like rainbows and like everybody has like everything that they need, and like nobody is suffering, and there's no more hunger, there's no more famine, there's no more like whatever, that like utopian like world peace like society. That's the fundamental idea of communism as I understand it. That is what communism is, in like its most basic, like purest form. So we're gonna get into the research. So I really like this way of. So I'm gonna quote from the citizensjournal.us. This was an article written in December 8th of 2021. Sorry. And it talks about, the title of the article is "What is Communism? Are you a communist?" And so it says, and I like this sort of like, in very simple words. Communism is the idea that every individual in a society receives an equal share of the benefits derived from labor. In such a society, the state would own everything, implying nothing, business, produce, whatever, would be owned by individuals. The wealth would be redistributed and equally divided among all individuals in a society, such that the rich would become less rich and the poor would become less poor, and ultimately all will achieve the same economic status. Okay, so that's sort of like, in a nutshell, what it is. If you want more like of a clinical definition of what communism is, that would be something like a political theory derived from Karl Marx, advocating class war and leading to a society in which all property is publicly owned and each person works and is paid according to their abilities and needs. So first of all, I kind of want to go on a side quest real quick. So that's a really common thing that is talked about. It is a quote. It is a quote. From each according to his ability, to each according to his need. So that is a really common like thing when you talk. You would hear it often in like communist circles is that phrase. So what does that phrase mean? So I looked it up because I wanted to like make sure, like I understood. Um so it's the principle that refers to free access to and distribution of goods, capitals, and services. It is derived from Karl Marx in his 1875 critique of the Gotha program. Um, and that's, I guess that's helpful, but like, what does that actually mean? So, uh, to each according to his contribution was a concept opposed by many members of the socialist and labor movement. The term means simply that each worker in a socialist society receives compensation and benefits according to the quality and value of the labor that he or she contributed. So that's sort of that. Um, but I just wanted to like quickly go over like that, what that is, um, before we kind of like got into, all the other stuff. Um, so okay, so communism itself, like the word, is a Latin word, that from words. It's early, sorry. Communism comes from the Latin. So this is from Corporate Finance Institute again. I feel like I've used them a lot, but they do have some like good stuff to say, I would say. And this is from an article that they did called Communism. It was updated March 12th of 2021. So keep that in mind. So it says that, like, and this is under the historical account of communism. Communism comes from the Latin word communis, which means common or shared. So communism is thought to come into existence in ancient times as considered in Plato's Socratic dialogue, The Republic, published around 375 BCE. Plato considered an ideal state in which a governing class of guardians serves the interest of the whole community by living as a large family, sharing the ownership of goods and labor, and people. So, but that would be like and labor. Um, Other early examples of communism are in Christianity, the formation of the Masonic order, and others. So I went and I kind of was like interested in that for a second. And as it turns out, yes, this is true. Um they so the idea is like, so okay. So this is from Investopedia, and this is like understanding communism and like what it is. But it's a really old, and this kind of surprised me, is that it's a really, really old idea. Like it's not, and this is not new. This is not anything that like has come, like, because like I would venture to guess that most people would say that like, you know, communism is a relatively like new form of government, that like it's, like it's been around only for a brief period of history, like considering the fact that like capitalism's been around for like ages, since, whatever, blah, 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 blah. But no, as it turns out, communism has been around forever. Um, so the idea, like the idea actually, like I said, has been around forever. And the book of Acts actually describes first century Christian communities holding property in common according to a system known as koinonia, which inspired later religious groups such as the 17th century English diggers to reject private ownership. Um, and I think that's highly interesting. That it's, you know, like it started like so long ago. You know what I'm saying? Like it started like forever ago. We just like the communism that like we understand is just fairly new, cuz I mean, like, so if you want to know specifically, like so the passages in Acts that like they're talking about specifically are Acts 4, book 4, verses 31 through 37, just in case, like, if you want to go look that up yourself, like, by all means go look it up. um but like that's where the so like that's they were talking about Like it's sort of like one of the first references other than like Plato's Republic that talks about like the first church regarded none of the possessions that they had as their personal property. Like it wasn't it it shows up really 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 early, like in like historically speaking, it shows up really early, so it's been around forever. But this article in the Corporate Finance Institute continues on and says, like, however, the emergence of modern communism was instigated by the Industrial Revolution of the late 18th and 19th centuries. So, yeah, so like the modern version that like you think of today, um, has only really been around, for like a couple hundred years. But the concept, the idea of communism has been around forever, like since the beginning of time, kind of thing. Um, which is kind of cool, actually. I kind of like find that like really, really interesting. Okay. Now, why do I find that super interesting? Because I feel like that part is always sort of like conveniently left out when talking about communism. Like it seems like, especially from a historical context, like when you're when you're being taught about communism and like what it is, nobody's ever like, oh yeah, hey, by the way, this idea has been around forever, and yeah, so even like as early, like it predates Christianity, kind of a thing, which is old, which is like really old. Um, so I don't know. I just find that like really interesting because, like I said, it's sort of like I feel like it gets conveniently left out. That like how old it is and like that this idea has been around forever and that like this idea of like world peace and this again fantasy, this, because that's what it is it's that fantasy. It's that fantasy that like, you know, that perfect world that like everybody wants to live in when you're a kid, that you like, you know, I mean, there's jokes about it in like, you know, modern media, you know, like that miscongeniality scene where they're like, and world peace. Like, but this is what that is. This is like if there was ever a word to like talk about what that um like if there was a word or a system of government that like encompasses world peace in the sense, uh that like quote unquote phrase, um like it would be communism. uh So okay, so now let's get into the modern stuff. Okay, so this is again from Investopedia. Um, um, this is from Investopedia, updated March 19th, 2022. What is communism? Learn the histories, pros and cons. So we're gonna get into now. We're gonna get into like the Communist Manifesto and like that piece of it, because that's sort of like the most, I guess, referenced version of communism and like the most well known. Um, so it says modern communism ideology began to develop during the French Revolution, and its and its seminal tract, excuse me, Karl Marx and Frederick Engels' Communist Manifesto was published in 1848. The pamphlet um, rejected the Christian tenor of previous communist philosophies, laying out a materialist and a pro and its proponents claim scientific analysis of the history and future trajectory of the human society. The history of all hitherto existing society, Marx and Engels wrote, is the history of class struggle. The Communist Manifesto presented the French Revolution as a major historical turning point when the bourgeoisie, the merchant class, that was in the process of consolidating control over the means of production, turned the feudal power structure and ushering in the modern capitalist era. So basically, what they're talking about is just that, like, capitalism is just like a modern version of is just the modern version of like the feudal system, where like, you know, you have like the serfs that like do all the work and like don't really get anything from it. um like the people that get like the most out of like the work is the merchant class or the bourgeoisie. um so it's just capitalism is just like that modern version of like the feudal. It's just been updated. Like capitalism is just the updated version of the feudal system. Um, the revolution replaced the medieval class structure, which pitted the nobility against the serfs, with the modern one pitting the bourgeoisie owners of capital against the proletariat, the working class who sell their labor for wages. Okay. In the Communist Manifesto and later works, Marx, Engels, and their followers advocate and predict as historically inevitable. So that, like they're making predictions. They're talking about like things that like the potential for things to happen. A global proletariat revolution, which would usher in the first era of socialism, then of communism. So like first you have to go through this socialistic like period where it but that transition period we talked about in the socialism episodes. Um, like that part is necessary. You have to go through that part before you get to like the communism like part of it, like that world peace, that like fantasy. Because it takes a long time to make a fantasy a reality, kind of a thing. The final stage of human development would mark the end of class struggle and therefore of history. All people would live in social equilibrium without class distinction, family structures, religion, or property. The state, too, would wither away. The economy would function as a popular Marxist slogan puts it, from each according to its abilities to according to each according to his needs. See, there's that thing that phrase that props up again. But so that's what they're talking about. Like they're saying that, first of all, it's gonna, the problem with trying to take a fantasy and making it, sorry, and making it like a reality, like in this physical, like real world kind of thing, is that one, it takes a long time. It takes a freaking long time, you guys. But like there are steps that need to be taken in order to like get to this ultimate goal of that like utopian world peace, like that fantasy society. And in that fantasy society, all of these things, the people would live in social equilibrium, without class distinction, family structures, religion, property, like all of these things would be, like wouldn't exist anymore. And not in the sense that like they wouldn't exist like forever. Like it wouldn't be like, it's not like they just like disappear or go away. It's more of, I think it's much more of this idea that like people would be able to live in a world where like with tolerance kind of a thing, and people would be able to live in this world where like, you know, you you wouldn't have to worry about things like, you know, is my water going to get turned off next month because I can't pay the bill. Like that's not a concern in this world. You don't have to worry about like where your next meal is coming from because like you have money to go buy groceries, or money doesn't even exist. Like in this like utopian world, like money is not a thing anymore. Like money does not exist. There are many examples of like um you know of societies that were moneyless and classless, that like didn't have any of those things. um the thing is that like it's hard. It's really hard to like get to that place. And so it's going to take a long time. Like if that is our ultimate goal as humanity, is to like get to this utopian world peace stage, it's going to take time. It's going to take a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of effort. And there are steps that like need to happen before like we can even get there, because like you can't just like overnight go from you can't just like overnight go from like, you know, a hellscape to the fantasy world. Kind of a thing. So there are steps that have to be taken. Now I do believe that like Marx and Engels were kind of big on the whole like the revolution kind of a situation where like it would take, like, that's what it would take. It would take like a giant group of people coming together and basically saying, no, this is what we want. This is the world that we want to live in. And we don't care anymore that, like, the needs of the few outweigh the needs of the many, kind of a situation. Which is what it would be in like a capitalistic society where the needs of the few outweigh the needs of the many. So yeah, so there's that. Now obviously there are many, many examples of like communist countries, and yeah, there are several examples of like communist countries. So like obviously the Soviet Union, communist China, um some like lesser, Cuba would be another big one that is, like, talked about a lot. I think that Cuba's really talked about a lot because, just of proximity to the US. It's so close to the United States. um that's one of the reasons why, like, you hear about it a lot. You also hear about like China and Russia, I would say, a lot too, because they sort of like, you know, made their marks, no pun intended, um, like on the map, kind of a thing. Um, they're so adamantly like against, or they're so like adamantly for like this idea that like it almost kind of backfired in a way where like it's like, it, like they're just like, have you ever met somebody that's like super into something, and then and they're just like so into it that it's almost kind of like annoying. um that's kind of like, that's sort of how I like view it. But that's sort of how we know more, but that's why we know more about like the Soviet Union or communist China. Now I will say this: everything that I have ever learned about, well, not everything, but a lot of the things, especially when I was younger, a lot of the things that I like, learned about as far as like like communist Russia or communist China has been tainted with a capitalistic lens. And the reason that it has been tainted by a capitalistic lens is because I live in a country where capitalism is the ruling king. And so, like, of course, everything that like I understand and know, maybe not everything, but a lot of the things that like I understand and know about these other countries, um are viewed through that capitalistic lens of being like, well, this is like bad because we are so like capitalism is so like against communism in that sense that it's just like it basically they're like two two ideas that are just like, they're those two friends when you're in high school that like just for whatever reason like can't get along, like that you have that just like can't get along for whatever reason. Like everybody's got their own reasons. They don't really, they're not really like, good reasons. They're just kind of like, you know they're kind of like toothpaste and toilet paper like reasons, if that makes sense, where they're just kind of like, yeah, I just don't like them, and you're just like, but why? And it's like, well, because I just don't. And you're like, okay, but that doesn't, like, there's nothing, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's sort of how I view like capitalism and communism as far as like the way that it is viewed. um so okay, so like in this, so like the Soviet Union, okay, so let's talk about the Soviet Union for a second. So Marx and Engels' theories would not be tested in the real world until after their deaths. In 1917, during World War One, there was the Russian Revolution. Okay, now a lot of people don't know a lot about the Russian Revolution. That's fine. We're going to go into a brief history. Where there was, okay, an uprising in Russia toppled the Tsar and sparked a civil war that eventually saw a group of radical Marxists led by Vladimir Lenin gaining power in 1922. Okay, yeah, that's the Russian Revolution. Okay, um, it was this whole idea that these people were going to rise up against the Tsar, and because people were starving, people were dying, people were suffering so much that they were just like, yeah, fuck this guy, um and his family, and we're going to, we're going to take over, and we're going to try and make a better life for everyone that lives in Russia. That's what we're going to do. That was the idea. It was, and the group is called the Bolsheviks. Founded the Soviet Union on former Imperial Russia territory and attempted to put communist theory into practice. Right? Okay. Prior to the Bolshevik Revolution / the Russian Revolution, look it up. It's really, really fascinating. It's really interesting. I hate to say enjoy, but I do enjoy learning about the Russian Revolution. If you want to get like sort of into a like if you want to watch like a movie kind of a thing about it, don't watch Anastasia. Even though great movie, love Anastasia. The 20th Century Fox, yes, I definitely saw that in theaters. Sorry, side quest. Anyway, anyway, so prior to that, Lenin had developed the Marxist theory of vanguardism, which argued that a close-knit group of politically enlightened elites was necessary to usher in the higher stages of economic and political evolution, socialism and finally communism. Okay, so I don't know how much of that I like, where it's like this whole idea of like, this small, close group of people that like, are the leaders of it. Like, I understand that like you probably need those people. Like, I get it. Like, you probably need those people. It's just one of those things where it's like, that seems kind of a little sketch as far as like, because if you give those people power, like absolute power kind of corrupts absolutely. So like, you better make sure that like you pick really good people to be, I guess, like, that's sort of my like caveat to it, is that like, make sure you pick like like really good people to like be in those like sort of positions of leadership, because otherwise like, yeah, absolute power is going to corrupt absolutely, obviously. So Lenin died shortly after the Civil War ended in Russia, but the dictatorship of the proletariat led by his successor Joseph Stalin would pursue brutal and and ideological purges, as well as forced agriculture cultivation. So yeah, tens of millions have died during Stalin's rule from 1922 to 1952, on top of tens of millions who died at the result of, Nazi Germany and all that kind of stuff. Um, so, so that's sort of like that. That's just like a little bit of that. Basically, Joseph Stalin like kind of took the idea of like the proletariat and like this vanguardism and like Marxism and basically kind of ran with it. It was just like mistakes were made, like big mistakes were made. And the thing is though, is that like I kind of feel like you could say that about, again, you could say that about like any form of government, that like there are leaders that just kind of like ran with stuff, and then and you're just, and like looking at it now from like like hindsight's 2020 kind of thing, where you're just like, yeah, so that wasn't the best choice. Like, I definitely wouldn't have done it like that, but like, you tried, I guess. Um so okay. So that's sort of, that's a little bit more about like the history of like the specific like Russian version of like communism. I have been able to like do a little bit more like digging and research, and what I found from like people that lived in communist Russia, like all of their accounts are kind of the same. Now, the people that I like, was able to sort of talk to, they they fully admitted, that they didn't live during like Stalin's rule. This was like after. This was, like sort of during that like other trends, like this other period where like all of that was kind of like over, and like their parents might have like grown up in that, but like they didn't. And so like their experience was very different from like, somebody else's experience. Like their parents' experience, for example, would be different than like theirs. But you know they definitely described it as, like equality is everywhere. Like there's no like, first of all, like not a lot of people would have like, say, a car, because public transportation is so good, and like they have really good roads, and like things of that nature where like, they have like, um, the infrastructure is there for them to be able to like you don't really need a car. You just kind of you just take the public, like the buses or whatever, like everywhere you need to go because like it's so reliable. Another thing that they said, they caveat kind of a thing, is that like, so medical care, yes, everybody has access to medical care. However, it's you know it, like if you needed something like an MRI, you would have to travel to like a bigger city, because like little towns, like the town that like I live in per se, wouldn't necessarily have like an MRI machine. You'd have to go somewhere else. You'd have to go to like a bigger city, like a major metropolitan area, um before like you would be able to get an MRI done, because just simply because you know that's where the MRI machine would be, kind of a thing. Um, and so things like that. But as far as like equality and stuff like that go, like if you want to be a doctor, like by all means you can be a doctor. If you want to be, a teacher, like then fine. If you want to be a whatever, just whatever, like you can do that. Um, in this sort of society, and you would get paid to each according to his ability to each according to his need. What is it? Oh my goodness. From each according to his ability to each according to his need. Okay. Oh my gosh. You think at this point I would know? I don't. Short term memory. Um. So okay. So here we go. So rather than withering away, the Soviet state became a powerful one party institution that prohibited dissent and occupied the commanding heights of the economy. Agriculture, the banking system, and industry production were subject to quotas and price control laid out in a series of a 5-year plan. The system of central planning enabled rapid industrialization, and from 1950 to 1965, growth in the Soviet Union, so their gross domestic product, outpaced that of the U.S. In general, however, the Soviet economy grew at a much slower pace than its capitalistic and democratic counterparts. Now, again, viewed through a capitalistic lens, however, um, it's that, again, I take issue kind of like with the execution of like the plan kind of thing. It's one of those things where it's like you make the plan, you make the plan, what is it? You make the plan, you execute the plan goes to shit, you like get rid of the plan. Like when you're like, obviously trial and error is a thing. Like it's going to take multiple different like times like to try and figure out what exactly is going to like work, in the real world. Like it's, even Karl Marx in the Communist Manifesto, at least in the copy that I have, has said within like the first 3 pages that this system will not work because humans, basically. Um, like it's a great idea on paper, but like humans ruin it, kind of a situation. And so that's why like it's so it's such a slow going thing. Like it's going to take forever. If this is the world that we want to live in, this world peace utopian like society where everybody's equal, everybody has everything that they need, everybody like is able to eat and sleep and do like all of the things that they need to do, it's going to take forever. It truly is. It's going to take time, because what you're trying to do is you are trying to change a fundamental value system of somebody else. And when you're trying to change a fundamental value system or belief system of somebody else, then that takes a really long time, because you have to kind of ease your way into it. You can't just like yell and scream at somebody and say and expect them to change their mind. Like this is going to be something that like takes forever. It's going to be something that takes a really 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 long time, like possibly hundreds of years, because you kind of have to go like one by one, like individual by individual, because especially in a capitalistic society, because we do live in because it is such an individualistic like way of thinking and value set, that it is going like you're changing, you're changing that thinking. And changing someone's thinking is very, very, very hard to do. It can be done. It is not impossible. It can be done. It just takes a long time. And you have to kind of go really slow, and like ease into it. You can't just like throw it all at the wall. I mean, you could. An argument can be made that like, you throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. And, you know, I would argue that like to a certain extent, certain countries have done that. But other countries, I think, have like understood, that like, it is going to take a long time. So, okay, so then it goes into, so this article keeps going into, and it keeps talking about, like, which is fine. It talks about like China, and how like, 15 million people were killed, 45, or perhaps more like 45 million, which got me curious. It got me thinking. So how many people has communism killed? Okay, let's just, how like, how many people has communism killed? So a rough estimate, is that communism has killed like 100 million people. Okay. Sorry. So I know it feels like I'm skipping around a lot because I kind of am, but I'm also trying to like cram as much into this episode as like humanly possible. I'm sorry. So yeah, okay. So this is an article from 2018, July 27th, 2018, and it says, if communism kills millions, how many has capitalism killed? Because I'm curious. Like, okay, let's say, for example, like this article says, okay, it goes around every few years. Communism killed 100 million people. All right, 100 million people. Sorry, 100 million people. That's a lot. That's a shitload of people. But like, how many has capitalism killed, right? Because like that's what we're comparing it to is capitalism. So in this article, it starts and says, okay, let's start in the obvious place. 13 million slaves were sold to the New World, America, North and South. In the United States, by 1860, just 400,000 North American slaves had become 4 million new ones born into slavery. That's 17 million people. Okay. Capitalism starting out strong. 17 million people. Great. Fast forward a century, the World War erupts, thanks in large part to, historians agree, to a global depression. But what caused the Great Depression? Capitalism, the speculative frenzy and inequality of the rip-roaring 20s. Sorry, rip-roaring 20s. So how many people died in World War II? It is estimated 25 million of just soldiers, 50, not 15, 50 million, including civilians, 80 million people, including famine, war crimes, and disease. So then, the Cold War, it wasn't, so then like, so then the Cold War capitalism. Yep. Capitalism. The Cold War happened. They're saying that's another 2.5 million people, roughly died. And then, before that, though we don't discuss it much today, was the Chinese Civil War, in which America and Soviet Russia fought by proximity. How many died? About 8 million people. Just those two hard wars of the Cold War, there were many more, adding another 10 million to our tally, making it 80 million. So we're up to 80 million people already, and that's just up to the Cold War. And then this goes on to talk about how many people died in the course of colonial mercantile empire. In the Congo alone, 10 million died. And noted Indian Parliament has estimated 35 million died under colonial rule. And then, let's see. Yet in many places, those wounds haven't healed. Congo is still exploited for its natural resources. But wait for it, capitalism, rubber, diamonds, metal, some of which are probably in your smartphone, and had another war in the 21st century, which killed 5 million. So what is our number now? In the last round, we added 50 million to 70 million people. So now we're up to 120 million, and that's still conservative. So this person is saying like this is we're up to 120 million people already, and that's a very conservative estimate because there are so many other things that like haven't been included. Um, there's this other article that says why capitalism doesn't kill 20 million people a year. Okay, this is more of like a critique on like why this number of 20 million people a year isn't true. And so we're going to just like explore that for a second. So it says, first, let's look at the numbers. The statistic cites that 8 million deaths are due to not having clean drinking water, 7,665,000 die due to hunger. 3 million a year die to vaccine preventable diseases, and 500,000 die of malaria a year. If you're curious, yes, it does roughly add up to 20 million. The problem with these numbers is that 93% of the malaria deaths take place in Africa. So their whole critique is that like, well, it's, it all takes place like in a place that's not the United States, for example. So it like I feel like the whole point of this article is that like, well, it doesn't count because it's like it's not within the US. And so I got curious. I was like, okay, well then how many people like in the US does it kill? Sorry. I should have put my phone on silent. Okay. But we are going to take a quick break before before we go into this other thing. So bear with me. But yeah, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be back in a second. What is up, you guys? I wanted to talk to you a little bit about our sponsor for this episode, Newsly. It's an audio app for iOS and Android where they basically take articles from all over the world and all the trending topics that are on the web at any given moment, and it reads them to you in like a natural voice, like a human being would. It's basically the first time in the history of the internet where the entire web becomes listenable. It's really cool, you guys. They have all different kinds of articles from all different kinds of topics so that you can like stop scrolling and start listening, which I really love. You can follow all the, any topic, all the topics, whatever topic you want to talk about or listen about, from sports, science, Bitcoin, even the Kardashians, like everybody. They have all the latest articles and it reads them to you. So it's super easy. They also have podcasts, which is why I'm talking to you guys about it, because our podcast, along with podcasts from over 50 other countries, are on the app. So that's really, really cool. You can start listening there as well. You can download and use Newsly for free right now at www.newsly.me, or you can use this link in the description. And when you use the promo code P1X1EP0DCAST, that will give you a free month of premium subscription to Newsly. So go check it out, you guys. And thank you so much to Newsly for sponsoring this episode. And we're back. And we are talking about my relationship with communism. So before we took the break, I was talking about like how many people has capitalism killed versus how many people has communism killed. And the article that I referenced was why capitalism doesn't kill 20 million people a year. And that was an article released April 27th, 2020. And like I said, it's kind of the whole like feel of this article, the vibe of this article is that like it doesn't count because it's in another country other than the United States. So I was like, okay, fine. How many people does capitalism kill in the United States every year? And as it turns out, I found an article written December 26th, 2022. And it says capitalism kills nearly 1 million Americans per year. Don't worry, I am going to put all of this stuff in the notes so that if you want to go back and read it, you absolutely can. And I encourage you to absolutely 100% go and do your own research and read about all of this. So the title of this article is Capitalism Kills Nearly 1 million Americans per year. So 1 million Americans a year. How are they getting that number? How exactly are they getting that number? So the study that, so the exact number, so it says, it's a shock considered a total number of Americans who die each year. Okay, so It's even more shocking when you consider that the total number of Americans who die each year is just over 3 million. So shocking that you might be wondering where the number is coming from and how this is totally fair. The exact number is 874,000. And that comes from a Columbia University study conducted in 2011, which studied deaths between 1980 and 2007. So this is a very big study. It's a very long study. Because of the age of the study and the worsening economic conditions we've been facing over the past several years, we may as well have broke the 1 million mark by now. So the study found the following data for the year 2000. Low education accounted for approximately 245,000 deaths. Racial segregation accounted for approximately 176,000 deaths. Low social support accounted for approximately 162,000 deaths. Individual level poverty accounted for approximately 133,000 deaths. Income inequality accounted for approximately 119,000 deaths. Area level poverty accounted for approximately 39,000 deaths. The researchers refer to all these things as social ills, aka byproducts of capitalism. So how does it like kill all these people? So this article talks about like capitalism can become a factor in an individual's death in various ways. It can be as straightforward as not being able to afford sufficient food or shelter and dying from malnutrition or exposure. Capitalism, or sometimes a fear of any other system but capitalism, is a cultural force that keeps Americans paying astronomical amounts for Medicare, for medical, for healthcare. Oh my gosh, for healthcare. Capitalism keeps higher education both exclusive and expensive. It also keeps people overworked, underpaid, and too beaten down to organize and engage in their communities. Capitalism is what keeps people living and dying in poverty. So that's the argument for this article. And this is not the only article that I found that like references this. So, you know, it basically what I'm saying is that like the numbers show, even a conservative number, like a very conservative estimate, is that like, so let's just for the sake of argument say that communism has killed 100 million people. Well, capitalism has killed at least that, if not more. So, because there's so many different things that like have not been accounted for, as far as like the death toll is concerned. So, you know, that's interesting, I think. We don't really talk about that very much, you know. So I guess like finally, before we like close out, I would kind of like to go over, so I found this Salon article, ironically, Salon, I know, coming in hot. And the title of this article, it was written in 2014, so it's not like the most up to date, but I did find it interesting that like Salon did publish that, and it did publish it, and the whole title is "Why You're Wrong About Communism: 7 Huge Misconceptions About It and Capitalism." And I kind of want to go over, and the reason that like I looked this up was because I was like, well, so like what's the deal, man? Like why, you know, why do Americans like hate communism? Like what is the deal? Like what are these common misconceptions that people have about communism that like just simply aren't true? So like, and these are 7 reasons. So the 7 reasons that Salon says are: 1, only communist economies rely on state violence. Obviously, no private equity baron worth his weight in leveraged buyouts will ever part willingly with his fortune, and any attempt to achieve economic justice, like taxation, will encounter stiff opposition from the ownership class. But state violence, like taxation, is inherent in every set of property rights a government can conceivably adopt, including those that allow aforementioned hypothetical baron to amass said fortune. In capitalism, in capitalism, competing ownership claims are settled by states' willingness to use violence to exclude all but one claimant. So they're saying that, like, you know, it violence is being used in order to keep the ruling class, the bourgeoisie, in like in place. You know what I'm saying? Like violence is used, so that where there isn't state, whoever has the most where there isn't a state, whoever has the most violent power determines who gets the stuff, be that a warlord, a knight, the mafia, or a gang of cowboys in the Wild West. Either by vigilantes or the state, property rights rely on violence. So it's just violence begets violence kind of a thing. And then it goes on to talk about like, this is true of both personal and private property, but it's important not to confuse the two. Property implies not a good, but a title, deeds, contracts, stocks, bonds, mortgages, etc. When Marxist talks of cultivating ownership claims on land or the means of production, we are in the realm of property. So that's what they're talking about. It's like, just keep that in mind. The next one is that capitalist economies are based on free exchange, which is untrue. I mean, again, in a perfect capitalist world, yes, that's how it works. But humans fuck it up. So we don't actually have like a free market. We don't have free exchange like in a capitalist society. In the capitalist society that like we know and to a certain extent love, I would argue. Especially like here in the United States, you know, free market, free market, free market. You hear all this stuff about free market, free market, free market. And it's like, yeah, but that doesn't exist. That does not exist. We already have like, we're already taking steps in this country that to like have socialist like programs. They're just for the rich, you know. We basically say that you just have to have enough zeros in your bank account in order for you to deserve it. In order for you to deserve all of these things, you just have to have like a certain, and I don't know what the magic number is. It seems like the magic number changes. It used to be like $1 million, you know, like now it's like, well, if you have billions of dollars, that like the goalpost is constantly moving. For like, in order for you to quote unquote deserve what you get, or not, well, not what you get, but like in order to deserve like help or, that kind of thing. So here we go. Communism killed 110 million people for resisting dispossession. Not true. Not true, apparently. They do reference, you know, like hence 100. So let's see. Recently advocated the position that only the threat of death can prop up a left-wing dream because no one in their right mind would ever volunteer for this crap, hence 110 million dead. In declaring this, Greg Gutfeld, he is a host of Fox News, apparently. I've never heard of him. I don't know who he is. Gutfeld and his ilk insult is referring to millions of people who died under Stalin, Mao, and other 20th century communist dictators. Yeah, so that's what he's referring to. But again, it doesn't go. Nobody ever talks about how we just did. How many people have died under capitalism? Like if you're if you're going to talk about like all of these deaths within communism, you must also talk about the number of deaths that and we may never know. We truly may never know like the actual number of deaths that occurred and that are still occurring every single day due to capitalism. We may never know what those actual numbers are. But it's a lot. It's at least, like I said, a conservative estimate is that it's at least the same amount. So at best, it's a wash, like comparatively, like, you know what I'm saying? Like it's a wash. But I mean, because we will never know the true numbers of how many people capitalism has actually killed throughout its history, it's probably not. Like capitalism has a higher death toll, I would say. So number 4, capitalist governments don't commit human rights atrocities. That's 100% bullshit. We all know that that's 100% bullshit. The slave trade, indigenous extermination, late Victorian Holocaust, and war, genocide, and massacre carried out by the U.S. and its proxies in an effort to defeat communism. So yeah, there you go. Millions of it even says here millions of deaths resulting from those countries' transitions to capitalism. Like you know what I'm saying? Like it's again with the numbers. Like we may never know, but you know it is disheartening as far as you know, and that doesn't include you know climate, famine, like all of these things. So number 5 is 21st century American communists would resemble 20th century Soviet and Chinese horrors. So sorry, you guys. Oh my gosh, so sorry. So that's, you know, again, change. Like it doesn't necessarily have to. Like it doesn't, and that starts with understanding. That starts with like it doesn't like that's not necessarily the truth that like 20th century American communism would resemble. Like no. Like nobody said we couldn't put our own spin on it. Like nobody said that we couldn't try like our own take on it. To take what didn't work, get rid of it, and you know figure out the rest, kind of a thing. Like you don't have to start from scratch. If we actually wanted to like achieve this like utopian world, like you have to start small, and so you have to like you know it would start with pockets of like you know it would start with pockets of like these you know of like little pieces of like light, if you will, throughout you know like the world. And like if America wanted to like take the reins and say like okay, we are going to strive for world peace, this is what we're actually going to do, we're going to try it, like it would look very different from what you know it used to look like you know after the Russian Revolution or after Mao came into power in China. Like it would look very different. It would be our own, like it would be our own brand sort of like of communism, kind of a thing. So yeah. So number 6 is communism fosters uniformity. Untrue. Apparently lots of people are unable to distinguish equality from homogeneity. Perhaps this derives from the tendency of people in capitalist societies to view themselves primarily as consumers. This dystopic fantasy is the supermarket wherein one state-owned brand of food is available. Yeah, see, and it's just talking about like that's not like you would still have variety. Like you just might not have 800 versions of like olives or whatever. Like you might only have like 10. Which, to be perfectly honest, there have been studies that show that like there's a threshold for like the number of choices that people can make, and within that threshold, like there is such a thing as like too many choices, because people will get overwhelmed, like, and then they just kind of like give up. So I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like it that's just like it's not this like gray sort of like idea. Like communism is not that. Communism fosters uniformity. Like that's not true, because like that's not what communism is. Communism wants you to have, like, communism is all about like freedom of like it is about freedom. It's about like being able to kind of do whatever you want to do, like when you want to do it, without having to fear that like I can't eat today. And it's not this like gray washed, you know, like colorless world where, you know, everybody does, like everybody wears the same clothes. Everybody, you know, does the same thing. Like, and you go and like that's not, no. That is the capitalistic colored like glasses that like have shaped what people view communism as, but that's not necessarily the case. If any of that makes sense, please let me know. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And finally, capitalism fosters individuality. So this is the last, you know, like debunked thing. So it says Instead of allowing all people to follow their entrepreneurial spirit into the endeavors that fulfill them, capitalism applauds the small number of entrepreneurs who capture large portions of mass market. This requires producing things on a mass scale, which imposes a double uniformity on society. Tons and tons of people all purchase the same products, and tons of people all perform the same labor. Such individuality is flourished amid this system is often extremely superficial. Yeah, so it's like it that they're talking about like the illusion of choice. Um I think that's sort of like what I gather from it is like they're talking about the illusion of choice. Um because it's all like tailor made. And so I mean, yeah. Uh yeah. So that's where we're at. I just kind of wanted to close out with that. There are a couple of other like um things from like the Freedom Man Online and Quora that I will reference in the notes so that you can kind of, and it talks about and those are sort of like why do capitalists hate communists so much, just to kind of give you like a better understanding and like idea of like why people don't, like why people in capitalist countries are like so opposed to communism, um just like for a better understanding. But yeah, so that's sort of like all I have. I'm sorry it was like fast and furious and like kind of all over the place. I was really just trying to get like everything into this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope it was okay. um Super anxious about it, very very anxious about it. But yeah, don't forget we do have a store now. We have a merch store now. So yeah, go check that out. And you can support the show by doing that. If you don't want to buy anything, that's totally fine. I completely understand. Money is tight for like everybody right now. I completely understand. I did try to make all the prices like as low as possible, so that I could still make a little bit of money, for the show, but also like be able it still be like accessible for everybody to be able to like get a t-shirt or something. We do have like 3 different designs and all the stuffs. So yeah, go check that out. If you don't want to support the show, you can always rate and review us on Apple, iTunes, or Spotify. That really, really helps the show out a lot. Um, I really appreciate that. Hit that like and subscribe button, all the things. We really appreciate it. And we love you guys. So thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. As always, be kind and stay weird. Have a good one, y'all. Bye.